The cold was a living thing. It was a predator, as real and as hungry as the saber-tooth that haunted the valleys or the dire wolf that prowled the frozen steppes. It did not hunt with fang and claw, but with a silent, invisible touch that stole the warmth from a man's bones and turned his breath to white smoke. For Kalen, and the handful of his kin who called the shallow cave at the foot of the blue glacier their home, it was an enemy they fought every moment of every day. This winter was worse. The sun, a pale, distant disk in the gray sky, offered no comfort. The winds that swept down from the glacier's shimmering peaks were filled with needles of ice that flayed any exposed skin and drove the snow into deep, treacherous drifts. The very air seemed to crackle with frost, and the ancient pines that clung to the mountainside were heavy with a shroud of white, their branches groaning under the weight. Inside the cave, the fire was the heart of their world. It was a ravenous, demanding heart, constantly crying out for the dry wood that was now so hard to find. The small clan of a dozen souls huddled close to its flickering light, their backs to the damp, cold stone. They were wrapped in the hides of deer and mountain goats, but the garments were old, the fur worn thin in patches, the seams stretched and torn. The cold crept through these weaknesses, a persistent, gnawing thief. Kalen watched the others from his place near the cave's mouth, a position he took by right of his strength and his skill with a spear. He was a young man, but the harshness of the world had carved lines of age onto his face. His shoulders were broad, his hands calloused and scarred from the working of flint and the butchering of kills. His eyes, the color of a stormy sky, held a deep and weary concern as he surveyed his family. He saw Lyra, his mate, her face etched with worry as she rocked their small son, Tor, in her arms. Tor's coughing was a constant, rasping sound in the cave, a dry, painful bark that spoke of the cold settling deep in his chest. He was wrapped in the softest rabbit furs they had, but Kalen knew it wasn't enough. He saw the boy shiver even in his sleep, his small body fighting a battle it was slowly losing. He saw old Alara, the keeper of their stories and their wisdom, her gnarled fingers so stiff with the chill that she could no longer weave cord from sinew. She sat hunched, her chin on her chest, her breathing shallow. Her gaze was often distant, fixed on the dancing flames, as if she could see the memories of warmer suns and greener lands that lived only in her tales. Her thin deerskin cloak offered as much protection as a handful of dry leaves against a blizzard. The hunters were restless. Bor, a man built like a bear, with a thick black beard that was often rimed with ice, stared into the fire, his jaw tight. He and Kalen had led a hunt 2 suns ago, tracking a herd of elk across the frozen plateau. The wind had been a physical blow, a wall of force that stole their breath and blinded them with driving snow. Their hands, even wrapped in scraps of fur, had become numb and clumsy. Bor had loosed his spear, a perfect throw in any other season, but his frozen fingers had betrayed him. The spear had flown wide, and the elk, ghosts in the swirling white, had vanished. They had returned empty-handed, the gnawing in their bellies matched only by the bitterness of their failure. The cold had defeated them. It had stolen their food. "The wind takes the strength from my arm," Bor had grumbled as they huddled back in the cave, trying to coax life back into their hands over the fire. "The spear feels like a block of ice. The cold hunts us, Kalen. It starves us out." Kalen had only nodded, his own frustration a hard knot in his gut. He knew Bor was right. They were being besieged. The cave was their fortress, but they could not stay in it forever. The last of the smoked meat from the autumn kill was dwindling, and the hunger was becoming a constant, dull ache. The memory of the failed hunt sparked a fire in Kalen's mind, a desperate, dangerous idea that had been flickering at the edges of his thoughts for many moons. He looked at the thin hides they all wore, hides that were meant for the milder seasons, not this age of ice. They were fighting a giant with the weapons of a child. They needed a new skin, a better shield. He thought of the great beasts of this frozen world, the ones who thrived in the bitter cold. The woolly mammoth with its thick, shaggy coat that hung like a curtain to the ground. The giant elk with its dense, warm pelt. And the most formidable of all, the great cave bear, whose fur was so thick and deep that it knew no winter. To wear the skin of such a beast would be to wear its strength, to steal its warmth and make it your own. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Hunting a mammoth was a task for a whole band of hunters, a coordinated effort of a dozen men or more, with traps and pits and a hail of spears. His clan was too small, too weak. The giant elk was swift, its senses sharp, a phantom of the forest. But the bear was a creature of power and solitude. Dangerous, yes. To face a cave bear was to face death itself. But it could be tracked, could be found in its lair. One man, if he was clever and brave and desperate enough, might stand a chance. He looked again at Tor, who whimpered in his sleep, his small face pale in the firelight. He saw Lyra pull the rabbit furs tighter, her own body shivering to give him what little warmth she had. He saw the weary resignation in the eyes of the others, the slow, creeping surrender to the cold's relentless siege. A decision solidified in Kalen's heart, hard and clear as a shard of flint. It was a choice born not of courage, but of necessity. He could not watch his son fade away. He could not watch his family starve and freeze. The risk of the hunt was great, but the certainty of doing nothing was greater. He would not just hunt for meat. He would hunt for warmth. He would hunt for a new skin, a cloak that could defy the wind and mock the snow. He would wrap his family in the strength of the great beasts and push back against the shivering grasp of the ice. That night, as the others slept fitfully, Kalen did not close his eyes. He sat by the dying embers of the fire, the cold stone at his back. In his hands he held his best spear, its long, straight shaft of yew smooth and familiar. With a piece of sharpened flint, he began to work on the tip, chipping away tiny flakes, honing it to a razor's edge. The soft click, click, click of the flint was the only sound in the cave, a quiet promise to the sleeping forms around him. He was no longer just a hunter. He was a craftsman with a singular purpose. He was preparing to steal the warmth of a god, and he would not fail. The image of a great, thick fur cloak, a shield against the world, burned bright in his mind, a beacon against the encroaching dark. Kalen left before the first hint of dawn. He moved with a predator's silence, slipping out of the cave while his clan still slept. Lyra had stirred as he'd risen, her eyes opening in the dim light. He had simply touched her cheek, a silent reassurance, and she had understood, her gaze filled with a mixture of fear and faith. He had pulled the thin hide over his shoulders, taken his newly sharpened spear, a flint knife, and a small pouch of dried berries, and stepped out into the frigid world. The cold was a physical shock, a blow to the chest that stole his breath. The air was still, and the silence of the pre-dawn landscape was absolute. His path led upward, away from the relative shelter of their valley and towards the jagged, wind-swept peaks where the bears made their lairs. He knew the tracks, had seen the signs for years, great, clawed prints in the hardened mud of autumn, massive trees scarred by territorial markings. He had always given the area a wide berth. Today he walked directly towards it. For hours he climbed. The sun rose, but it was a useless, watery light that did little to pierce the profound chill. His world was shades of white and gray, the snow-covered ground, the dark rock of the mountains, the endless pale sky. His own breath plumed before him, the only sign of warmth in the vast, frozen emptiness. His focus narrowed to the task, his senses alive and straining. He was not merely looking, he was reading the landscape. A bent branch here, a dislodged stone there, the faintest depression in the snow. He was searching for the trail of a solitary male, a large one, driven from its den by hunger. He found the tracks near midday. They were huge, larger than his own splayed hand, pressed deep into a drift of snow in the lee of a granite cliff. They were fresh. A thrill, cold and sharp as the wind, shot through him. The beast was close. He slowed his pace, his every movement deliberate and controlled. He tested the wind, ensuring he stayed downwind of his prey. The silence was now a tense, humming thing, filled with unseen menace. The trail led him to a fissure in the mountainside, a dark, gaping maw partially hidden by a curtain of immense icicles. A low, guttural sound, a grumbling snore, drifted from within. The bear was inside. Kalen's heart hammered against his ribs. To face the bear in its den was suicide. He would have to draw it out. He found his spot, a small thicket of frost-stiffened pines about 30 paces from the cave mouth. It offered concealment but also a clear line of sight. He settled in to wait. The waiting was its own form of torture. The cold, which he had held at bay with the exertion of the climb, began to seep into him. His feet grew numb, his fingers stiff. He flexed them constantly, fighting the creeping paralysis. He ate a few of the frozen berries, their sharp, sweet taste a small explosion in his mouth. He could not afford a fire. The smoke would give him away. He could only endure. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent, the rumbling from the cave ceased. A moment later, a massive head emerged, its small, dark eyes blinking in the pale light. The bear was enormous, a mountain of muscle and matted, dark fur. Its shoulders were a great hump of power, and its breath billowed in the frigid air. It sniffed the air, its great snout twitching, sensing the world in a way Kalen could only imagine. It was not the scent of man it caught, but the promise of food on the wind from the valley below. The bear ambled out of its cave, its huge paws making no sound on the snow. It was a creature perfectly suited to this world, insulated by its thick coat, its body a furnace of life. Kalen felt a pang of awe, of reverence for the magnificent beast. This was the warmth he had come to claim. He waited until the bear was fully in the open, its flank exposed to him. His moment had come. All the fear, the cold, the waiting, coalesced into a single point of pure focus. He rose from his concealment, his movements fluid and swift. In one smooth, powerful motion, he brought his arm back and hurled the spear. The yew shaft flew true, a dark streak against the snow. It struck the bear high on the side, behind the massive shoulder, sinking deep into its body. The world erupted in a roar of agony and rage. The bear spun, its head snapping around to bite at the spear shaft protruding from its side. Its roar echoed off the cliffs, a sound of pure, primal fury. It saw Kalen then, and its small eyes locked onto him with a terrifying intelligence. Kalen had already abandoned his hiding place, scrambling back, putting distance between himself and the wounded animal. The bear charged. It was a nightmare of speed and power, an avalanche of fur and claws. It closed the distance in a few gigantic bounds, the ground seeming to shake under its weight. Kalen had his flint knife in his hand, a pathetically small weapon against such a foe. He dodged to the side as the bear swiped at him, a blow that would have crushed his skull. The wind of its passing was a foul, hot blast. He scrambled over a rocky outcrop, using the terrain to his advantage, forcing the bear to turn. The spear shaft, jolting with every movement, was hampering the beast, maddening it. It was a brutal, desperate dance. Kalen was a flea tormenting a god. He dodged and weaved, his lungs burning, his muscles screaming. He was not fighting the bear. He was fighting for time, waiting for the spear to do its work, for the great heart to slow and stop. The bear, in its fury, was bleeding heavily, a dark stain spreading across its magnificent coat and steaming on the pure white snow. Slowly, agonizingly, the beast began to tire. His charges became slower, its roars less powerful. Staggered, shaking its great head. Finally, it stopped, swaying on its feet. It looked at Kalen one last time, not with rage, but with a kind of weary surprise. Then, with a great sigh that plumed in the air, it collapsed onto the snow. Silence descended once more, broken only by Kalen's ragged gasps. He stood for a long time, watching, ensuring the beast was truly dead. The relief was so profound it left him weak, his legs trembling. He had done it. He had faced the god of the mountain and won. He approached the still form with reverence. He placed a hand on its thick, warm fur. The life was gone, but the warmth remained. It was a profound, deep heat, the legacy of the bear's powerful life. "Forgive me, brother," he whispered to the still form. "Your strength will protect my child. Your warmth will shelter my family." The work that followed was arduous. The skinning was a meticulous, exhausting task for one man. With his flint knife, he made the careful cuts, his cold-numbed fingers working with practiced skill. He had to work quickly before the carcass froze solid. The hide was immense, heavy, and thick with fat. It took all his strength to peel it from the muscle and bone. He scraped it as best he could on the frozen ground, and then, leaving the meat for a later trip with Boar, he began the monumental task of hauling the prize home. He rolled the hide, fur inward, and wrestled it onto his back. The weight was immense, but it was a burden of hope. As he began his descent, the setting sun cast long, blue shadows across the snow. The wind picked up, howling its mournful song. But Kalen barely felt it. The thick, heavy hide on his back was a shield, blocking the wind, its residual warmth seeping into him. When he finally stumbled into the light of the fire at the cave's mouth, he was a figure of legend. He was covered in blood and exhaustion, but on his back, he carried a gift greater than any amount of meat. He unrolled the great hide on the ground, and the clan gathered, their eyes wide with awe. In the days that followed, the cave was filled with the work of turning the raw pelt into a cloak. Kalen and Boar scraped the last of the fat from the skin with sharpened stones. Lyra and Alara rubbed it with rendered fat and brains to soften it, their hands working tirelessly. They smoked it over a low, smoldering fire until it was pliable and strong. When it was finally done, it was a masterpiece of survival. It was heavy, far heavier than any deerskin, and the fur was deep and unimaginably warm. Kalen took it first, draping it over his shoulders. The weight was comforting, a solid presence. The warmth was instantaneous, a profound cocoon of heat that felt like a personal sun. He walked to the mouth of the cave. The wind was blowing hard, a gale of ice and snow. He stepped out into it. The wind howled and tore at him, but it could not pierce the bear's gift. It swirled around him, impotent. For the first time, he did not shiver. He stood tall, a man wrapped in the power of the wild, and looked out at the bitter cold of the Ice Age, not as a victim, but as a survivor. He had crafted more than a cloak. He had crafted a future.